How do you use Bitcoin to buy your dream home? In this video, I want to go into this topic in depth. Let's get started. I want to start with this really important video that I found online from Daniel Foch. It's a chart that shows you over time, an interactive chart that shows you the percentage change of home buyers since 2015. So the percentage of people who are buying for different purposes in their life. So some people are buying as investors, some people are buying as first-time home buyers, others are buying as repeat home buyers. So let's say they sell their first house and then they buy a second house. They want to upgrade. The first-time home buyers are just people who are buying for the very first time. They've never owned a house before, and investors are people who are buying houses to make money. So they're basically using the housing market as a business. So let's start the chart and then I'll give you some commentary on what's happening. So over time you see here that the number of investors is skyrocketing. It's increasing. It's increasing really quickly. And the number of first time home buyers is decreasing. Over time, you see that the chart for investors is getting higher and higher, and it's accelerating. The number of investors is increasing and increasing much, much faster than the first time home buyers. There's a temporary point here where the first time home buyers increases slightly, but over time it just continues to go down because people can't afford their first home. The number of first time home buyers has decreased significantly because home prices keep going up. Houses keep getting more expensive. The people who are investing in houses and are already in the housing market are able to buy more houses because I highlighted the strategy, the buy, borrow, die strategy with Bitcoin, but I also spoke about the real estate strategy. So, what they do is they buy houses, they borrow against the equity they build in the houses, and then they buy more houses. So, the people who are investors will buy multiple houses and they'll compound the number of houses they'll have. So they'll go from 1 to 2 to 5 to 10 to 20. There are people who own thousands of houses. And why exactly do you need thousands of houses? What do you need thousands of houses for? What are you using those thousands of houses for? You're using them to extract value from society. You're hoarding something that people need to survive, and you're not putting it back in the market. You're not using it. In a way, this is extortion because if somebody doesn't pay the rent that you want, then they have a choice. They can just go homeless, right? That's the only choice they have. And more people are going homeless, not by choice, but because they have no other option. Things are getting worse. We see a lot more people who can't afford a home, people in tents in my area, people who are doing drugs on the side of the road, and I don't know if they went homeless as a result of doing those drugs, or if they started doing drugs as a result of going homeless. But the trend is continuing. More and more people aren't able to buy their first house because the price of housing continues to rise. If you take a look at the price of a house over time, it continues to increase, but this is when it's priced in dollars. If it's priced in Bitcoin, the price of the house will continue to fall forever. House prices are crashing in terms of Bitcoin because Bitcoin can't be printed. You can see here the returns from housing look really great when you don't compare them to Bitcoin, when you don't compare them to a better asset. But when you compare them to Bitcoin, the growth in house prices looks terrible. So investing in housing is a terrible decision if you're not buying that house for yourself. If you're buying it for yourself, that's a great decision. Go buy a house. You have stability, you have more control over your expenses. I think buying a house if you want to live in it is a perfectly fine decision, but you have to keep in mind that it's a lifestyle decision. It's not an investment. Buying a house is not an investment because over time it costs you money. It takes money out of your pocket. It doesn't put more money into your pocket. Unless, let's say, you rent the basement. Maybe in that case, it'll put a little bit of money in your pocket and maybe it'll decrease your cost of living in a house. But if you have the choice between buying Bitcoin or buying a house to either invest or to just live in for yourself, then I think the choice is pretty clear here. If you buy Bitcoin today, you'll be able to buy more houses in the future. And let me show you how obvious this becomes when you price houses in Bitcoin. So you can see here, over time, the price of a house will continue to fall in terms of Bitcoin because Bitcoin's returns are going to be much, much higher than houses. And the reason for that is that new Bitcoin can't be printed. There's a limited supply of Bitcoin. The rate of issuance for Bitcoin is constantly decreasing and it's taking more and more time to create Bitcoin. While with housing, you can create more houses over time. You can keep creating more and more houses. You can keep building more and more houses. You can keep developing new land. You can build higher. At some point, we'll probably be able to build deeper into the ground. I don't know what kind of technology will exist in 10, 20, 30, 50 years. But over time, I think that the number of houses that exist that could potentially be on sale will probably increase much faster than the supply of Bitcoin can increase because Bitcoin is almost already at its peak. We already have about 20 million Bitcoin already, 19.8, 19.9 million Bitcoin are already in existence. And there's only ever going to be 21 million. So if you want to buy Bitcoin, you have to convince somebody who has Bitcoin to sell it to you. On the other hand, if you want to buy a house, you can go to a builder and that builder can build a new house for you at any time. They can do that at any time. You have to, of course, pay for it, but the option is there. And you can see the trend here. Over time, the price of housing is decreasing in terms of Bitcoin, and it'll continue to decrease in terms of Bitcoin forever because it's getting harder and harder to create more Bitcoin while it's getting easier and easier to build more houses. So you can see here in 2021, at the peak of Bitcoin's bull market, one house cost about 6 Bitcoin. Today, it costs about 3.5 to 4 Bitcoin because the price of Bitcoin has risen while the price of housing has also risen in that time. Bitcoin's price has risen faster. So now let's say you wanted to save for a house. You want to save enough dollars or Bitcoin or whatever you want to save to buy that house. Let's say you save dollars. Over time, your purchasing power is going to decrease. So let's say you save a down payment to buy a house. Over time, the price of the house is going to keep increasing and your down payment is going to have to increase at the same time. So if you just put dollars in a bank account, what you're doing is you're holding on to a melting ice cube. It'll keep losing its purchasing power over time because more dollars can be printed faster than houses can be built. So let me connect the dots for you there. Dollars are easier to create than houses, so the price of houses in terms of dollars continues to go up forever. Bitcoin is harder to create than houses, so the price of houses in terms of Bitcoin decreases forever. So over time, if you own dollars, you can exchange those dollars for fewer houses because the purchasing power of those dollars is decreasing. But if you own houses, you can eventually sell those houses for more dollars. It's pretty much guaranteed at this point because the US government has to continue printing and printing and printing and borrowing in order to just continue its operations. So over time, your house is going to continue to be worth more and more in terms of dollars because dollars are being printed and they're abundant. There's no limit to how many dollars can exist. So housing is scarce depending on the context of how you measure the price of housing. So in terms of dollars, housing is very scarce, but in terms of Bitcoin, housing is not scarce. In terms of Bitcoin, the price of housing will continue to decrease forever because the number of people who can pay, let's say, 4 Bitcoin for a house is going to always fall because the price of Bitcoin is going to continue to increase. So over time, you can hold on to Bitcoin, a certain amount of Bitcoin, and you'll be able to buy more and more housing with that Bitcoin. So let's say today your Bitcoin stack, let's say you have zero point 0.1 Bitcoin set aside for a house. Today, you can buy $10,000 worth of housing with that Bitcoin or 12,000, whatever the price is. At some point, as the price of that Bitcoin rises, because the price of Bitcoin is going to rise much faster than housing, because there's an incentive for everybody on earth to own Bitcoin. And only, let's say, 1% of people own it. So everybody on earth can own it, and everybody on earth has a reason to own it, and only 1% of people own it. You're going to see that as people accumulate, as people add Bitcoin to their wallets and they never sell again, the price of Bitcoin will rise. And you'll be able to buy more and more houses with your Bitcoin. So today, let's say you can buy 0.01 houses with 0.1 Bitcoin. At some point, you'll be able to buy a whole house with 0.1 Bitcoin. So there are a couple ways to save for a house. If you just save fiat, at some point, you're not going to be able to buy a house with whatever fiat you own because the purchasing power of that fiat will continue to decrease. And you're going to see that your down payment today may be a certain amount, but at some point it'll be much, much higher than what it is today. So if you save in dollars, you're going to have to add more and more money to your down payment. You're going to have to save more and more dollars. You're going to have to work harder in order to just keep up with the price of housing. But if you save Bitcoin, over time, if you just put your money into Bitcoin and you just let it sit there and wait and just relax and don't think too much about the price, eventually that Bitcoin will be either worth the down payment, even if it's not worth that down payment today, at some point it will be, or you'll be able to buy the entire house with that Bitcoin. And I know not everybody has just a lump sum of money to put into a down payment or to put into Bitcoin today, and that's perfectly fine. I'm going to compare a few different scenarios depending on where you are in life, depending on if you're a first-time home buyer, depending on if you're a repeat home buyer, whatever your current status is. I'm going to go through a few of those scenarios in the rest of this video. These are the scenarios that I'm going to go through. You might have noticed here that I didn't put investing because I don't believe that you should invest in houses. I think that Bitcoin is a much better option for you to save for the future and to invest for the future. So if you want to, let's say, put money away for your kid instead of buying a rental property, I think you should buy Bitcoin. If you're planning to put money away for, let's say, retirement instead of buying rental properties, buy Bitcoin. So in this case, let's say you're saving for a future purchase. So this could be something like retirement. If you're saving for retirement, I think you should buy Bitcoin instead of buying a rental property. Or if you're saving for a future home purchase, again, you should buy Bitcoin instead of putting that money towards a down payment and then using that money to get a mortgage and then have payments for the rest of your life. I think that you should buy Bitcoin instead of both of those. Same thing with if you have money saved already to purchase today. So let's say, for example, if you have a down payment saved already and you could put that down payment on a house and you could get a mortgage and you're good to go, I think you should buy Bitcoin instead and you should wait a few years and you should rent instead of just buying the house. If I had that option and I went back a few years before we bought this house, I would have suggested that we should buy Bitcoin instead of buying the house immediately. I would have suggested that we buy Bitcoin and wait 3 to 4 years. We had purchased a pre construction house and it took a few years to be built. So, in that time, if we had just bought Bitcoin and then when the house was built, if we had just bought a house that was already ready to be lived in, we would have probably had a lot more money today and we would have had a lot more Bitcoin today. And that would have been a great decision. Of course, we didn't make it. And I think it's very difficult at this point to sell a house and just go to renting because you have to get rid of your roots and all that stuff. Everything you've built, we're comfortable in this house. So we don't really plan to do that. But if I had the option to go back in time and do it again, that's what I would do. And then the next one here, selling your house today to buy back later. I don't know if this is the best decision because owning your house gives you stability. It gives you um, a consistent expense every month rather than having to move every year and not have stability in your life. So I think this is very difficult. And this is not for everybody. If you want to, of course, this would probably be the best financial decision you can make. But if you don't feel comfortable doing it, then don't do it. That's perfectly fine. So let's go into the compound interest calculator. We'll go with saving for a future purchase first. So let's say, for example, if you want to put away a certain amount of money to buy a house, let's say you we'll be serious here. We're going to go with something like $2,000 a month because if you're saving for a down payment, you need to put away a significant amount of money, at least in the legacy financial system. So if you wanted to put in your bank account, you could put away $2,000 per month and after like 5, 6 years, you'd have enough for a down payment. So let's go with $2,000 a month. I added a couple of different columns here. You can see here there's the house price. You can put in the price, whatever price of the house you have or whatever price you want, wherever the house is. So let's say you have a $750,000 house. You can also put in the house appreciation rate. So there's a couple of different tabs here as well. So house appreciation 5%. So we can see here is over time the price of that house will keep going up. So by 2031, if you wanted to buy a $750,000 house, by 2031, that house would be $1 million. Now let's go with a little bit more of a reasonable house. We'll go with something like $350,000. I think that's definitely possible to find a house for $350,000, a house or condo. I think that's reasonable. So if you were to put away $2,000 a month for 3 years, let's go for 4 years. You would have put away $96,000. You would have enough to pay for a down payment on this house. So about 25%, maybe even 20%, whatever you're okay with. So let's say you put away 25% and you use that as your down payment. If you had just saved Bitcoin instead of putting that money into cash, if you had just kept cash, you would have had $96,000. But if you had put it into Bitcoin, in 4 years, you'd have $193,000. So you would have doubled your cash performance. And keep in mind that this is with a very conservative 30% return. I think the return will be higher. I could be wrong there, But if we want to go more conservative, we can. I think the return will be 40 to 50% per year for the next 5 to 10 years at least. After that, I don't know. It could increase. Maybe if the world really adopts Bitcoin, that accelerates. But who knows what will happen? So let's just go conservative here. In this case, if you had saved in Bitcoin $2,000 per month instead of cash, you would have $193,000 versus $96,000. So what can you do with this $193,000? If you wanted to buy that same house, let's say in this case, you would have just put the cash into the house, into the down payment. What you could do here is instead of just selling this Bitcoin, paying the taxes, and then having to put that money into the down payment for the house, you could take a loan against that Bitcoin. And I'm not saying that this is always the best decision, but in this case, it could be because you could take a 50% LTV loan against this Bitcoin. You could potentially just keep the Bitcoin forever if Bitcoin's price doesn't crash after you take the loan. And you can also have the down payment for the house. So all you're doing is you're taking advantage of how the system works with money printing and how more and more money can be printed. This is exactly what the investors are doing today. The real estate investors, this is exactly what they're doing. They're just taking their assets that they have today, they're taking a loan against that asset, and they're buying whatever house they can. They're using that loan to put a down payment on the house, and as the price of the house goes up, they take on another loan, and they take on another loan. And what you could do to make this loan a little bit more secure, if you want to, you could wait a couple years. Let's say you wait until 2031 instead of 2029. You wait until 2031, and in 2031 your stack is worth 84% of the price of the house. And you've continued to stack more and more Bitcoin over time. You continue to buy until at some point your stack is worth 100% of the value of the house. So instead of having to put away whatever down payment amount you would have put away and then having payments for 30 years, so you put away the down payment for, let's say, 5 years, and then you make payments for another 30 years. That's 35 years that you took to own your house. In this case, let's say this house is $350,000. In a few years, it'll be $492,000. It would have appreciated from $350,000 to $500,000, but your stack would have gone from zero all the way to $548,000. So at this point, your choices are whatever you want to do, right? So you can borrow against this and you can put a down payment on this house. Let's say you borrow $100,000 against your stack. You have 20% loan to value, a little bit less than 20% loan to value, and you can borrow the money to buy the house if you want to continue making payments. If you're going to continue making payments for rent, why not continue making payments for a mortgage if that's the way that you want to do it? Because that way you have the stability. So you can use that Bitcoin to build stability for yourself, which to me is extremely important. I find that very important. And I'm sure if you're watching this video, you find that important as well. Over time, if you have stability, you can take more risks. You can take on different business ventures that you otherwise wouldn't be able to. So if you buy this Bitcoin, you keep buying it, and then you take on a loan against that Bitcoin and you buy the house, you put the down payment on the house and you make your payments on the house. Over time, it just gets easier and easier for you to accumulate fiat because your skills get better. You're able to charge a higher hourly rate. So at this point, maybe the payment, whatever payment you have to make on this house, isn't too much for you to handle. And then you can combine this with the buy, borrow, die strategy that I spoke about in those last couple of videos, where you don't have to pay back the debt. You never have to pay it back. At some point, that will be the case because your Bitcoin will continue to appreciate while fiat currencies continue to die. So that's that first option. We have saving for a future purchase. In this case, you're just putting money away to buy a house. You're putting away a monthly amount every single month to buy that house. If you're putting away a smaller amount, let's say you go with $500 a month instead of 2,000. Not everybody can afford 2,000. I understand that. And let's say the price of the house, I need to fix this, but let's say the price of the house is $350,000. How long will it take you to own that house in cash with $500 per month? So you could buy this house for $500 per month in 13 years. You can see the stack divided by the house price, 115%. If you consider taxes, then it'll be 14 years. So 14 years to accumulate $500 worth of Bitcoin per month, and then you can give away that Bitcoin for that house. That's crazy to me. At some point, that $500 per month of Bitcoin is going to be worth 529% of the house price if it keeps rising at 30% per year. And I think that's definitely possible. I know a lot of people think that there's going to be diminishing returns and it'll continue to the returns will continue to shrink. But you have to remember that the US dollar can continue to lose value forever. It can lose 50% of its value, then it can lose another 50%, then it can lose another 50%, and it can keep going forever. There's no limit to how many dollars can be printed. You have to understand this. So Bitcoin's price can literally go up forever. There's no stopping this. This thing is not going to stop. So what you see here is this finite asset is appreciating much, much faster than the other. It seems finite, but it's really not, because more houses can be built, and you can essentially say they can be printed and added to the economy. So over time, your stack, your $500 per month, is going to buy you your house in cash. That's crazy, in cash. If you have 600, let's say for example, in 2046, your Bitcoin's worth $6.3 million. Let's go with 2045. So your Bitcoin's worth $5 million. You could sell 20% of your stack and you can buy one whole house. Or if you wanted to, let's say you change these numbers. We go with $1 million house at this point. $500 per month. You see here, $500 per month. The number was over on that side. Yeah, $500 per month will buy you the house that's worth $1 million today, and it keeps rising and it keeps rising at 5% per year. It'll buy you that house in cash. Let's go double. So it'll buy you two of those houses in 2046. This is so powerful, and too many people are ignoring this. People are just not looking at this in the way that they should be. They are ignoring the possibilities here. They're not looking at this the right way. They're letting their ego get in the way. And this is stopping them from being able to buy their dream house. At some point, they will be able to buy their dream house with Bitcoin, because over time, Bitcoin is going to get more and more widely used. The price will continue to rise. You're going to see that people are selling their rental properties to buy houses. The one thing that that chart should have showed you is that investors are buying houses. So the market is becoming more and more speculative. How many investors are there going to be that will continue to buy houses once they figure out what Bitcoin is? How many of those investors are going to sell their houses and just dump them into the market, because they understand that it doesn't matter what price they get for their house, over time, their Bitcoin is going to be able to buy way more houses for their portfolio. How many people will understand this and they'll start dumping their houses into the market? How many people do you think will sell their house for whatever they can get, and house appreciation actually decreases? So let's say instead of 5%, it goes to 2%. And that's definitely possible, because a lot of people who own houses today own multiple houses. When you look at how prices are determined at the margin. They're determined by the buyer and seller. If there are no buyers, then the sellers have to keep decreasing their prices. Even 2% in that case would be extremely high. I think that the housing market needs a huge correction. So these prices should actually be decreasing over time. But if the housing market only increased at 2% per year, by 2041, you could buy your dream house with $500 per month. If the price of the house is $2 million today, you'll see that by 2043, you have enough Bitcoin to buy your house. If you want to take on a loan against that Bitcoin to buy the house, by 2050, you'll have 558% of the house price in your Bitcoin stack. You'd have 0.22 Bitcoin. One Bitcoin will be worth almost $100 million at that point by 2050. And this is with a 30% return. So over time, more and more money will flow into Bitcoin. You're going to see more and more real estate investors put their money into Bitcoin. And that's going to make it so that house prices decrease even faster in terms of Bitcoin. The collapse is going to accelerate. But when you look at this collapse in dollars, it's not there. It's hidden. This is a silent collapse. The real estate market is collapsing silently in terms of Bitcoin, which is going to be the future of money. Over time, you're going to see this continue and continue. So the next option here, we'll go to back to the spreadsheet. The next option here is you already have the money saved to purchase a house today. In the previous example, I mentioned that the down payment on a house would be about $100,000. But let's say you don't have $100,000. Instead of $100,000, you have $47,000 and you want to buy a house. So you'll buy a house that's cheaper. You'll buy a house that's a fixer-upper, whatever you have to do in order to get a house. But instead of buying that house, let's say you choose to buy 0.4 Bitcoin instead, and then you buy no more Bitcoin again. This is like Jor from 88 Sats Radios, his little strategy of setting aside a UTXO to buy a house and then using that UTXO. Whenever it's worth the same amount as the house, sell it, buy a house, or borrow against it and buy a house. So in this case, you have 0.4 Bitcoin. Number doesn't increase. You put $0 into this portfolio. You just leave that UTXO aside. The house is $350,000 in 2034. So in 9 years, you'll be able to buy the house in cash. It blows my mind when I look at this. It would take you 30 years to make payments because the banks are making so much money on these houses and you're giving it to them. We kind of have to. That's just how the fiat system works. There was no other option before because the stock market was extremely volatile. It didn't have a real cycle. The price of a stock could go down for 10 years, 20 years. The stock market could be down for a significant amount of time if there's no more money printed. And I don't know if that was sustainable. I don't think I would have suggested that to anybody. But with Bitcoin, if you hold it for a longer period of time, you know exactly how many Bitcoin will exist. You know exactly how many Bitcoin will very likely come to the market. You know how much Bitcoin will be sold. If Bitcoin isn't being sold today, it means at some point it will be sold or it'll be held forever. So let's say at $100,000, there was a certain amount of Bitcoin sold. Maybe the next level where a lot of Bitcoin is sold is 1 million. Then the next level is 5 million, or the next level is 10 million. So over time, people will sell their Bitcoin, but they'll sell higher and higher. So over time, you'll see that because there's a finite supply of Bitcoin, that increase in price will be more consistent. At least that's what I think will happen. So you'll see here that if you save in Bitcoin for that house, eventually you'll be able to pay for it in cash or you'll be able to borrow against that house and you'll just be able to pay for that house outright. And you don't have to deal with mortgage payments. If your LTV is low enough, you may never have to pay back that loan again. So let's say you wait until 2042, you keep stacking Bitcoin, you rent a house or whatever you do in that period, or you rent a living space in that period of time. By 2042, your stack will be 832% of the price of that house. So $350,000 house will be about $500,000 by that point. Your stack in 2043 will be 10 times the price of that house. And this is with a 2% growth rate. So let's go with that. Let's go back to that 5% growth rate just for the sake of this example. And keep in mind that this is a $350,000 house. I need to fix that link. So in this case, 2043, the house would be $850,000. Your stack would be 6 times your house, the price of that house. The price of the house would have increased, but it wouldn't have increased as fast as Bitcoin. In that time, Bitcoin would have gone from $117,000 all the way to $13 million, one Bitcoin. In that time, the house would have gone from $350,000 to $842,000. So instead of making a down payment on a house with your cash, I think you should buy Bitcoin. And then at some point in the future, you'll be able to buy that house outright with no payments, probably a lot sooner than you would if you just made your mortgage payments over time. You could probably stack this with mortgage payments, meaning that you could borrow against a smaller amount of your stack, and then you could make payments. You could just replace your rental payments with your mortgage payment over time. And then the third option here is selling your house to buy Bitcoin today to buy back later. So let's say you can sell the house for $500,000 and your net proceeds on that house is one Bitcoin. So we'll just go to one Bitcoin, $117,000. No real reason for this. You can go with a lower number if you want to, but you just buy Bitcoin with it. At some point, your Bitcoin will be worth 105% of the value of that house, even though the house price is going to keep appreciating. Now, again, this is probably the most difficult decision to make because you have to pay realtor fees. Are those realtor fees worth all of the hassle of getting a marginally higher amount of Bitcoin compared to just maybe working harder at your job? Because I think the house stability actually gives you the option to do more with your career. I think having the $2,000 per month, $3,000, 4,000, whatever the payment is per month, and having that consistency and knowing that you'll be able to continuously pay this amount, and this is the only amount that you need to earn from your job. And then, other than this amount, you can do whatever you want to earn more money. I think that gives you more potential. I think that gives you more of a risk appetite to start a business. I think that's probably the easier way to go because you don't know when your rental payment will increase. You have no idea. If you get kicked out, let's say your landlord kicks you out and then your rental payment doubles. You can't really prepare for that. That's extremely difficult to prepare for because how much cash are you going to set aside? So in this case, you have a $500,000 house, you could buy one Bitcoin. If you wait a few years, let's say 2032, you could have 105% of the value of the house. But I think there's a better option if you own a house already. What you could do is you could get a HELOC against that house. Of course, that's going to add some risk. But if you buy Bitcoin with it and Bitcoin's price increases the way that I think it will, the way that you most likely think it will, I think that would lead to you being better off because you have the house, you have the stability, and you have the Bitcoin. You can just make the payments on the HELOC. You can make the interest only payments. The interest only payments on this HELOC would probably be something like $500 to $700 per month. So it's almost like your dollar cost averaging into Bitcoin, but you're getting all of the Bitcoin up front. I don't know if you can understand that, if you can wrap your head around that, but you're getting all of the Bitcoin today rather than having to wait to get it in the future when the price is much, much higher. So if you were to make those payments, I think you'd be much, much better off instead of selling your house and giving away your stability and then having to deal with realtor fees, having to deal with land transfer taxes, all of the taxes that come with, or the fees and taxes that come with selling a house, listing a house, and all that, all the headache, the pain. I think you'd probably be better off if it's your primary residence, you plan to live there for 10, 20, 30 years. I think you'd be better off just taking a loan against your house. I think that might be smarter. And I'm not telling you to do this. I'm just thinking from my own perspective. In my own perspective, instead of selling my house to make, let's say, $100,000 in profit, I think it would be smarter to take a loan and keep the house because we know that the house is already built the way it is. We've designed it the way we like. And keeping the house just gets rid of a lot of the headache of having to go to a new house and then having to redecorate and all that stuff, the pain that goes into it, the time that goes into it. It's just really annoying. So whether you are a first-time home buyer, you are a repeat home buyer, or you're an investor, I think that the best decision that you can make is buy Bitcoin. It doesn't matter what your situation is. I think you may be better off renting if you're a first-time home buyer for at least the first few years. If I could go back, that's what I would personally do. What I would suggest here is buy Bitcoin, set it aside, and wait. And if you want to accelerate the process, you can continue to buy more Bitcoin over time. If you have any questions about this, you can book a one-on-one meeting with me. The link is in the description below. There's also a link in the description and in the pinned comment for the Bitcoin Explained community where there's a lot more Bitcoin content. Bitcoin is much deeper than people think, and I think wrapping your head around these concepts is really important if you really want to start building wealth for the future. Studying Bitcoin is going to help you to increase your conviction, and it's going to help you to increase how much Bitcoin you have in your portfolio so you can get to whatever goals you have sooner rather than later. So let's say you're 30 today. If you're saving in Bitcoin, you could probably retire within the next 15 years. But if you're saving in US dollars, you'll probably never be able to retire because you can't outpace the money printer. You can't work harder to make money and to increase your skills than the money printer can print more and more dollars. So buy Bitcoin and wait. In the next 5, 10, 15 years, you're going to have so many options that you don't have today because the current financial system is rigged to keep you away from financial freedom.